All right, so just a quick reminder before we get back into the 1001 Nights here. If you are going to revise your paper for a better grade, right, that is due on Thursday. A couple people have actually already submitted something. I haven't had time to look at it yet. But yeah, if you want to improve that paper grade, Thursday is the last day for that. And then we'll talk in more detail about the second paper assignment next time. But it is posted to Georgia View. It's going to be a comparative assignment. So you're going to want to think about like what text from the first half of the semester, that is before the midterm exam, you could most productively compare with a text from the second half of the semester. That is going to be a research paper, so it would also probably be in your best interest to get started fairly early. And if you need any help with the research, then just come talk to me, and we'll figure something out.
When is that paper due?
That paper will be due. I don't have the date off the top of my head, but it'll be due during finals week. Okay, so I just want to talk a little bit about what it is we're actually looking at from a historical, literary, cultural standpoint when we look at the Knights. Right now, our last presentation group did a really good job of talking about how the stories work in a lot of elements from everyday Islamic observance, Islamic practice, right? But I'd like to talk a little bit about how this particular text has been received in the Arab world and elsewhere before we start talking about the contents again in too much detail, right? So this is not in the Arab world regarded as a work of important high literary merit. What it is really is an example of medieval Arabic pop culture. Right? Usually when we think of something as literary, right, we don't think of it as or something as highbrow, right? We don't think of it as having originated amongst ordinary people. We think of it as something that has been sort of produced by and for the consumption of an educated elite, right? And for much of what we've read, that's true. That's what it was. Even if it was consumed by ordinary people, it was still produced by members of some sort of educated elite. That is not the case with the 1001 Nights. The 1001 Nights is a kind of amorphous and shifting collection of stories, right? Not all versions contain the same stories told in the same ways, right? So there are many different alternate versions, and many of the most famous stories that we associate with the Knights aren't actually part of the collection at all, or at least not in any of its Arabic forms. So when you think of the 1001 Nights, what stories are, what are the familiar stories? What are the stories that are best known?
Aladdin.
Okay, Aladdin, yeah, all of you jump to Aladdin, right, because friggin' Disney. Okay, Aladdin. What else? Any others?
Well, I remember some. I have it right there.
The one with the talking fish, I think. Yeah, because that's been presented in different ways too.
Okay. Yeah, that talking fish trope appears in a variety of stories across a variety of cultures. Any other specific stories that...
I'm not gonna lie, before this and excluding Aladdin, I've never been exposed to,
Okay.
to this, so
Yeah.
at least that I know of.
Mhm.
I guess The cave with the.
Okay, yeah, Alibaba and the 40
Yeah.
Thieves, right? Which I first experienced as a kid,
Which one?
as a Alibaba. I first experienced as a kid as a video game that my father stayed up 72 hours straight playing. He would go to work at the power plant, come home, put this stupid game in the computer, eat his dinner at the computer, and just instead he was just trying to solve that stupid game and get into that stupid cave. The story of Sinbad the Sailor, right, is another one of the sort of familiar tales. Now, of the most familiar stories in the West, only Alibaba is actually a part of Arabic collections of these tales. So how did these other tales get in there? Where do they come from? Well, Aladdin isn't even Arabic. Although many of the tales in the 1001 Nights are not of Arabic origin, right? They are, in many cases, Arabic retellings of tales of Persian, Indian, or North African origin. So Aladdin is an Indian tale that is added to the collection by European translators. And Sinbad the Sailor is a tale that the first European translator of the Nights, a Frenchman by the name of Antoine Galland, got from itinerant Arabic storytellers who were living in Paris. Now, why did people like Galland feel like they needed to go out and collect more stories? Can anybody guess?
Just for culture.
Well, they were very much interested in Middle Eastern and Indian culture in particular, and in learning more about it.
I mean, could it be an assumption on Galan's part that these stories actually were important? Like, were the high literary that we normally expect?
Probably not so much. Galland's translation was clearly intended for popular consumption and not for scholars. What if we sort of reminded, like, the name often in common parlance is the Arabian Nights, right? But the actual literal Arabic translation of the name Alf Layla wa Layla is 1001 Nights. So by going out and collecting these extra stories, what were people like Galland probably trying to do?
Find 1001 stories.
Exactly. They were trying to get the count up to 1001, right? They misunderstood what the title meant in an Arabic context, right? So I think we discussed this last time, right? That all 1001 means in an Arabic context is abundance, right? Overflowing. This is a lot of stories. It was never intended to actually reach 1001. And then when these European translators are going over these manuscripts, they're like, well, wait a minute, there aren't 1001 stories here. Some of them must be lost or missing. So we have to go hunt them down and find them. And so they start adding stories from other collections, other traditions. And the 1001 Nights is actually just the most famous of a number of medieval Arabic story compilations. There's another one, was recently published in a new translation. I think it's called News of the Strange. But they all have these sort of framing device stories attached to them.
So did it ever reach 1001 stories?
Nah. Most of the, most of the existing manuscripts are so far from 1001 that you would have to add a hell of a lot of stories in order to actually get to that number. The earliest manuscript, actually, the one on which this translation is based, is an 8th century Syrian text. The most complete, as far as we can tell, is a medieval Egyptian text. But they're substantially different from each other. Different storytellers had different repertoire. And while they do contain that same framing device of the jealousy of Shahryar and the cleverness of Shahrazad, the stories that Shahrazad tells throughout the collection are different in different manuscripts. So that doesn't mean, like, this lack of consistency doesn't mean that this has nothing to offer us or nothing to show us about medieval Islamic culture. Now, if we think back to the Quranic idea of God, right? What is Allah like? How is he different from the Jewish or the Christian God?
He's ultimately divine. He never assumes a human form.
Okay, Allah, right, totally divine, cannot assume human form, right? That's the one thing he can't do. What else is different about Allah? In terms of, say, the amount of leeway he gives to human beings.
It's almost like they say that like nothing happens by like accident.
Mm-hmm.
It's like everything is the way it is because he says it is. So it's like there's no free will. Everything is totally pre-planned out.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like
or even if it isn't pre-planned out, it happens because Allah lets it happen,
yeah.
right? Nothing happens without Allah's say-so.
Yeah.
So he is totally omnipotent. And yeah, free will is regarded as an illusion, right? The idea is not, as in Christianity, say for example, to make a free choice, to follow the idea. Like Islam means, to devote oneself or to submit. Yeah, Larry.
I just find it interesting that in the book, apparently Allah, he created humans and demons, and then there's some demons that actually worship Islam and Allah.
Yeah. The jinn. Some of the jinn are Muslims, and some of the jinn are not. And yeah, the evil jinn are those who reject God and reject Islam, right? So the jinn that the Fisherman releases, for example, from the jar, is one of these evil jinn who had refused to serve. So what we see bubbling, that's actually a sort of good example. What we see in the 1001 Nights is the bubbling up of some older folkloric traditions as well, right? That there are jinn all over the place here, these kind of supernatural beings. These things that maybe don't have too much to do with Islamic theology, but that do have a lot to do with the folk beliefs of the people. So, one of the things that we see, though, in the 1001 Nights as a whole, is a kind of implicit criticism of the all-powerful, right? Of people who have ultimate power over everything. Now, this may be in part because, for a believing Muslim, right, this is a power that should be reserved to God, not to human beings. But yeah, there is a kind of implicit critique of power here, particularly power wielded arbitrarily. And I think that's one of the things that most shows the origins of this particular text in popular culture. Right? That the kings, the demons, the ultra powerful, are typically the bad guys. Right? Whereas it's, you know, say, clever fishermen or vizier's daughters who are the heroes. Right? So if we look at that story, let's actually go to the story of the fisherman and the demon. What'd you think of this one? How'd this go for you? Yeah.
A little trickier to follow.
What's that?
Well, the structure of it is stories within stories within stories.
Yeah.
This one has a little more of that.
Yeah, the further we get from Shahrazad, right, the harder it is to figure out exactly where we are anymore. So let's look at how, just the technique here and how this is. This is actually really very cleverly done, right? So we have, right, our outer story, our outer frame is still right, the madness of King Shahryar and the healing love of his wife Shahrazad, right? Now we have an inner frame as well. The fisherman and the demon. And within the story of the fisherman and the demon, right, the fisherman tells a story that contains two other stories, right? We have the story of King Yunan and his sage Duban, and within that, the tale of the husband and the parrot, and the prince and the ghoul. Which then come back out to the King Yunan and Duban, inner frame, right? Which then goes back out to the fisherman and the demon frame, which then becomes the jumping off point for an entirely different story about the young king and the enchanted fish, right? So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, really 6 different stories operating within one another, and all of them intended really in many ways towards the same purpose, right? So when we look at the fisherman and the demon, right? What's the fisherman's situation at the beginning of the story? Yeah, his efforts are entirely useless, right? It is related on page 577 that there was a very old fisherman who had a wife and 3 daughters, and who was so poor that they did not even have enough food for the day. It was this fisherman's custom to cast his net 4 times a day. One day, while the moon was still up, he went out with his net at the call for the early morning prayer. He reached the outskirts of the city and came to the seashore. Then he set down his basket, rolled up his shirt, and waded to his waist in the water. He cast his net and waited for it to sink. Then he gathered the rope and started to pull. As he pulled little by little, he felt that the net was getting heavier until he was unable to pull any further. He climbed ashore, drove a stake into the ground, and tied the end of the rope to the stake. Then he took off his clothes, dove into the water, and went around the net, shaking it and tugging at it until he managed to pull it ashore. Feeling extremely happy, he put on his clothes and went back to the net. But when he opened it, he found inside a dead donkey which had torn it apart. The fisherman felt sad and depressed and said to himself, "There is no power and no strength save in God, the Almighty, the Magnificent," adding, "Indeed, this is a strange catch." Right, so one thing that I think is important here is that not only does the fisherman not catch any fish here, right, but the things that he does catch, right, they destroy his nets, they make more work for him, right? Now, how might fishing as an occupation, right, casting nets out into the water, be a kind of metaphoric expression of certain religious ideas we've been talking about, right? If you are casting your net out into the water and then pulling it back, who are you relying on to provide for you, essentially? Yeah.
It's a game of chance. Alright, I'm just gonna throw this out and hope for the best.
But if you're a believing Muslim, there is no chance, right? God either lets the fish flow into your net, or he does not.
Or that's a dead donkey.
Yeah, or he lets a dead donkey into your nets, right? So, if you are throwing your nets out and getting nothing, right, for your efforts, it is because God does not want you, for whatever reason, catching any fish. Then he began to recite the following verses. O you who brave the danger in the dark, reduce your toil, for gain is not in work. Look at the fisherman who labors at his trade, as the stars in the night their orbits make, and deeply wades into the raging sea, steadily gazing at the swelling net, till he returns, pleased with his nightly catch, a fish whose mouth the hook of death has cut, and sells it to a man who sleeps the night. Safe from the cold and blessed with every wish, praise be the Lord who blesses and withholds. This casts the net, but that one eats the fish. There's a little bit of social class tension in this verse as well, right? You know, he talks, this casts the net, but that one eats the fish. Like, even if I do catch any fish, even if God does allow me to catch fish, I'm not going to be the one that gets to eat it. Right? I'm catching fish for someone else's table. So there is, in much of this story in particular, a level of elite envy anyway, right? Now, when he does finally catch the jar, what happens?
He was excited.
Okay, yeah, when he's actually finally caught something that might be worth something, right?
He
It's
wants
like,
to sell it.
yeah, it's okay, it's not fish, but maybe he can sell this. And then, who the hell has to catch fish then? Or I can buy the damn fish.
But then he throws it back because he opens it and it's full of mud.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the second jar, right? Or that's the first jar, right? The second jar.
That he gets. It's too heavy to move.
Yeah. The enormous jar with the strange seal on it.
Don't go over strange seals.
Nope. Somebody sealed that for a reason. Can I get a volunteer to read the last paragraph on page 579?
After a while, there began to emerge from the jar a great column of smoke, which rose and spread over the face of the earth, increasing so much that it covered the sea, and rising so high that it reached the clouds and hid the daylight.
Mm-hmm.
For a long time, the smoke kept rising from the jar. Then it gathered and took shape, and suddenly it shook, and there stood a demon, with its feet on the ground and its head in the clouds. He had a head like a tomb, fangs like pincers, a mouth like a cave, teeth like stones, nostrils like trumpets, ears like shields, a throat like an alley, and eyes like lanterns. In short, all one can say is that he was a hideous monster. When the fisherman saw him, he shook with terror, his jaws locked together, and his mouth went dry. The demon cried, O Solomon, prophet of God, forgive me, never again will I disobey you or defy your commands.
All right, so what's the demon's attitude upon initially being released?
He thinks that the one who sealed him away is letting him out finally.
Yeah, and subservient, right? Submissive. Initially submissive. All right, he thinks, okay, this powerful king and prophet who sealed me away in this jar is the one who has released me. I'd better be good because he can put me back in there. Right? So initially, yeah, he's submissive. Now, let's continue this. Can I get somebody to read from I Heard, O Happy King on page 580?
I heard, O happy king, that when the fisherman heard what the demon said, he asked, Demon, what are you saying? It's been more than 1,800 years since the prophet Solomon died, and we are now ages later. What is your story, and why were you in this jar? When the demon heard the fisherman, he said, Be glad. The fisherman cried, Oh, happy day. The demon added, Be glad that you will soon be put to death. The fisherman said, You deserve to be put to shame for such tidings. Why do you wish to kill me? I who have released you and delivered you from the bottom of the sea and brought you back to this world. The demon replied, "Make a wish." The fisherman was happy and asked, "What shall I wish for you?" The demon replied, "Tell me how you wish to die, and what manner of death you wish me to choose." The fisherman asked, "What is my crime? Is this my reward from you for having delivered you?" The demon replied, "Fisherman, listen to my story." The fisherman said, "Make it short, for I am at my rope's end."
Okay, you can stop there, right? So once the demon realizes it's not Solomon who's let him out, how's his tune change?
He's like, yeah, no.
Yeah,
Forever, you're gonna die.
Yeah.
Here.
yeah. You, I'm gonna kill you. You get to decide how I kill you, but I'm still gonna kill you, right? So,
No gratitude or nothing.
yeah,
You're not powerful, you're just a fisherman. All right,
Uh-huh.
I'm gonna kill you. I'm gonna let you choose how you die.
Yeah.
I'm gonna kill you.
Oh, you're nobody.
You're
Yeah.
nobody. You're not important.
Now what? And why is this particularly unfair?
Because he didn't.
Because he didn't
Yeah,
do anything.
the
All he
fisher-
did was let him out.
Yeah, the fisherman has done nothing to harm the demon, has in fact helped the demon, and for arbitrary reasons of its own, the demon has decided that instead of rewarding him, it's going to kill him.
All based on something he planned like 800,000 years ago.
Yeah, all based on, yeah, that's the result of something someone else did, right? Someone else sealed the demon in the jar, and so the demon decides it's just going to punish the first person it sees, right? Because it's been seething in that jar for 1,000
Well,
years.
originally he planned on giving them good things and then.
Sure,
in the end.
but then as time went on, he, you know, one grows bitter and cynical, and one spends 1,000 years in a jar. But yeah, so the whole point of this is that, like, yeah, his anger towards the fisherman is ungrateful. It's ingratitude and it's arbitrary, right? There is no good reason why the fisherman ought to be punished for letting the demon go.
Just like how Shahryar and his brother are killing all those women.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah. Now there is a slight sort of development on the theme here, though, right? Now, Shahryar and his brother were killing women, well, after they had, killed the faithless wives, right, and concubines, right? They started killing women who hadn't done anything wrong, right? How is the situation with the fisherman and demon actually slightly different?
He did instantly kill him.
Okay, he hasn't instantly, yeah, the demon hasn't instantly killed him. He gives the fisherman just enough time to trick him.
The Shahs are killing women for something they might do. The demon's killing the fisherman with no regards to what he's going to do or not.
Well, and the fisherman actually has done something,
He
right?
did something good.
He did something good for the demon, yeah. He actually did the demon a good turn, right? He has benefited the demon, and the demon is going to kill him anyway.
from a grudge.
Yeah, against someone else.
Like her telling the stories which he loves.
Uh-huh.
He's saying he's still going to kill it.
Yeah, so we see that frame moving slightly, right, advancing slightly in this set of stories, right? From being angry with people whom you have no reason to be angry at, to being angry with people who have actually done something good for you, right? The story of the merchant and the demon, right? When the merchant throws the date pit, like, he did kill the demon's son, right? But he didn't do it on purpose. There was no possible way he could have known that he'd done so. So that is just a sort of totally arbitrary punishment, right? Now this is a different level of cruelty because the demon is punishing someone who has done him some good. So how does this relate to the story the fisherman tells of King Yunan and the sage?
Because the sage was just trying to help him, and he killed him because somebody else told him that he wasn't really trying to help him.
Yeah, it's another instance of a powerful individual killing his benefactor. Right, remember, and we can actually sort of make a connection here to the lowest levels of Dante's hell, right? We have those 3 rings of the frozen lake, right? They're people who killed relatives, that's the outer ring. People who betrayed their nation, that's the second ring. The third ring is people who betrayed their guests, people to whom they owed hospitality. And the fourth ring, the very, very lowest, the very worst of all, are people who betrayed their benefactors, right? Satan in the very center of the lake who betrayed God, Judas Iscariot who betrayed Jesus, and Brutus and Cassius who betrayed Julius Caesar, right? All getting eternally chewed on and Satan's hideous maw. Like it's probably the worst. Like it must be worst for the one who is face first, because then he's got to smell the breath. But anyway, yes, I think so. But yeah, so what's King Yunan's problem at the beginning of the story?
He has nose.
Yeah, he suffers from leprosy, right? Now, we all know more or less what leprosy is, right? Right, it's a degenerative disease, afflicts the skin and nervous system, and you kind of pieces of you tend to fall off. Yeah, essentially your body rots while you're still alive. So King Yunan is suffering from leprosy. No one can cure him. This sage Duban manages to come up with something. And what's particularly ingenious about Duban's cure?
Is that he puts it right through the circulatory system.
Yeah, he makes this mallet, right, with a sort of porous handle. He tells the king to go play polo with it. And the king does. He rides around the field. He sweats. The medicines soak into his blood. He goes and takes a bath, and suddenly he's cured, right? Now, how does Duban describe his cure? What does he say is special about his particular cure? If we look at the bottom of page 582. Mm-hmm. I can treat you without giving you any medicine to drink or ointment to apply. When the king heard this, he said, if you succeed, I will bestow on you riches that would be enough for you and your grandchildren. I will bestow favors on you, and I will make you my companion and friend. The king bestowed robes of honor on the sage, treated him kindly, and then asked him, can you really cure me from my leprosy without any medicine to drink or ointment to apply? The sage replied, yes, I will cure you externally.
I feel like he kind of cheated him. I feel like he kind of cheated. Because, it's still considered like an ointment just because, it went through his skin.
Yeah.
It was an external treatment, but it was still kind of like an ointment.
Uh-huh.
Because, he still had to hold the thing in order to treat it.
Let's give medieval medicine some leeway. The fact that it worked at all,
Yeah.
honestly, should amaze us. Although, actually, this was something in which, in the Middle Ages, the Arab world was light years ahead of Europe in terms of medical knowledge. We were still, you've got a cold, well, we're going to bleed you out. Yeah, because less blood, that's what will make you feel better. But yeah, I think the key word here is that he's going to cure the king externally. Right, which is literally true of the cure, but this word actually has a kind of loaded symbolic value in terms of the story as well. Right? What else might be meant by curing the king externally? What can Duban not cure in King Yunan?
Which actually.
Yeah, he can't cure the king's stupidity or his paranoia, right? Right? We are told that King Yunan is not terribly clever, that he is rather easily led, and that this unscrupulous vizier is able to turn him against Duban, to whom he owes his life and health.
Really, a magic guy who can apparently cure me without touching me? Dude who gives me advice on the game. Who am I gonna keep with?
Yeah, magic guy's probably more useful. But even sort of setting aside the relative use value of different individuals. This is basically the vizier's own thought process. Right? It's like, okay, this guy's got a lot more going for him than I do. Better look out for my own, or I'm screwed. What is Duban then able to do once it becomes clear that the king is going to kill him no matter what? Yeah. Duban, with his superior cleverness, is able to sort of tell the king of a wonder that will happen when you strike off my head and start leafing through the pages of this book, right? So in the end, punishing the sage unfairly leads to the king's own death because the sage is smarter than he is. So there's a sort of dual message in the story the fisherman tells to the demon, right? On the one hand, it's that you should not behave cruelly to those who have done you good. Yeah, the other side of this is, I'm smarter than you are. And I am going to be able to get back at you if you insist on messing with me, right? If you insist on punishing me for something I didn't do. So how does the fisherman get his own back against the demon?
He tricks him into getting back in the face.
Yeah. Yeah, he uses the gift of human reason, right? Let's see, where...
It's like, with that statement, does it mean that demons don't have reasoning?
Yeah, reason is regarded as a sort of gift given only to human beings.
Okay.
That animals and jinn do not possess that capacity. So, he is able to use his human wiles to trick the jinn into giving him... And this is not the first time we've seen somebody trick a jinn, right? We see demons getting fooled all the time in these stories. It's because they don't follow the same rules of logic that human beings do. So because of their different natures, the fisherman is able to con the demon. And then the demon is properly chastened and rewards him, right? But with a kind of weird backhanded reward. So what's weird about the fish that the demon directs the fisherman towards? Yeah, they're not fish, they're people. Yeah. That's part of it, right?
Also, they're shiny, pretty colored.
Yep, shiny
Isn't that weird? Fish are different colors.
They are.
Like, I was very confused why the king in the later part of the story and why the fisherman was so surprised because there were red and yellow fish. They're all
They're probably just the one type of fish.
I don't know what kind of
Yeah.
fish are native to India. I think that's where this takes place. Or there.
Yeah. Lake fish would probably be a weird thing on the Arabian Peninsula anyway,
Sure.
at all, right?
The more. So I found this giant body of water.
Yeah, in the middle of the mountains, and it's only an hour away, and you've never seen it before. Yeah. So there are all sorts of weird, kind of red flags about all of this, right? You've got the beautiful multicolored fish. You've got the 4 mountains and the lake where no one realized there was a lake before, right? Because it's actually a year's distance away from the city, right? They've only reached it here because it's enchanted. But the fish are the enchanted human inhabitants of another kingdom, right? And their color the color they assume in fish form is dependent on which religion they followed as human beings, right? So the Muslims that become fish are white. The Zoroastrians are red. I believe the Christians are blue and the Jews are yellow. And every time the cook tries to cook them in the pan, right? Some figure comes breaking through that wall, recites a weird little chant, the fish respond, and the pan gets turned over, right? Because you're cooking people. Enchanted people. Yeah. Don't do that. But the whole point here, and this sort of makes one wonder about the larger workings of the frame story, is to get the king of this city out to that lake and out to the young king who's been enchanted, right? Now, what do we note about the curse that has been placed on the young king? How has he been cursed?
It's half stone, half person.
Yeah, his upper half is flesh, right? His lower half has been turned to stone. And this is actually kind of important thematically, given sort of other things that go on in the story. Like when he tells his tale, what does his wife steal from him when she goes off to meet her lover? She steals his sword, right? Yeah, she takes his sword from him. And when he grabs it back to attack the lover, how successful is his attack? Yeah, Larry.
It's a whole, innuendo about demasculation.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're talking about. Yeah. The young king has been emasculated, right? His wife stole his sword. Even when he gets it back, he can't use it effectively. And the curse under which he's placed turns the nether regions of his body to stone, right? So yeah, he has been unmanned by his wife in a couple of different ways.
But you have he.
What's that?
Well, he's made of stone, so he can't use the bathroom. So I bet you when he gets reversed, he really has to go.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, yeah. I don't know. I mean, I guess maybe his kidneys are stone too.
Kidney stone.
Oh, God. Oh, yeah. All right. That's not bad for a Monday. Okay, yeah. But the basic point is, as Larry was saying, that he's been unmanned, he's been emasculated by his wife. So, the whole point of the story of the young king is to, this older king, this more experienced king, has to step in and do the job for him, right? He has proven himself not ready, not capable of taking on the burden of rulership yet. He needs to be sort of trained and educated. In fact, what relationship does he then develop with the older king when they return to the city? Yeah, he's adopted as son and heir by this older king, right? And he gives up rulership of his own city, right? Sort of acknowledging that he's not quite ready for it yet. So there seems to be an idea here that youth and inexperience make for a bad ruler, right? And that what good rulers need are, one, a model of strength and intelligence to follow. And secondly, experience. And a certain level of humanity as well, right? Rulers who treat their subjects badly or treat others badly fare badly. So there's the refrain that keeps getting repeated in the story, the fisherman story, and in the story of the king and Duban, right? For God's sake, spare me, and God will spare you. Destroy me, and God will destroy you. Right? The cruel and the unjust get their comeuppance. The cruel and the unjust will always be dealt with in the manner they deserve. So God may allow you to destroy me, but he will also avenge me because you treated me unfairly when I was kind to you. Right? There is, and that's one thing I think we should probably draw a connection to. This is going to sound a little weird, but this is actually kind of one sort of similarity that Islam, at least in popular practice, has with Confucianism. Is this kind of emphasis on social reciprocity, right? That God or the heavens will treat you, will deal out justice to you according to the way you treat other people, right? We see this in the first half of what we read of the 1001 Nights when we look at this, the story of the old man and the dogs, right? That he's rewarded by the female demon because he's generous, right? People who give to others, people who take care of others get rewarded. People who are cruel to others get punished. All right. Do any of you have any questions about any of this or anything that you guys want to talk about? I mean, this is basically what I wanted to cover here. Any questions at all?
Is there a reason it ends at the 27th word?
Because it's just an excerpt. The actual manuscript this is taken from continues further, but Norton tends to give you like what they think are representative examples from these kinds of texts. Now, I don't always agree that the examples are completely representative, but hey, we work with what we got. Any other questions? About fish, about justice, about proper techniques for frying the peoples of the book? All right, so we're going to be moving on next time to medieval travel narratives. So I have some questions I want you to mull over. So we're going to be looking at excerpts from the Travels of Marco Polo, the Travels of Ibn Battuta, and the Book of Sir John Mandeville. Two of these travelers are real people. The third is not. I will leave it up to you to decide which of these three travelers is a fictional personage.